Hello, I'm Hilary Broad and I've been drawing and painting for most of my life so far. Over the years, I've explored various techniques to save time and to improve the variety and fun in my work. I discovered silk painting a number of years ago when a friend saw me colouring in one of my line drawings and declared, "Hilary, that would make a brilliant design for a silk painting. More than that, could she have a copy to reproduce on silk?" And here is Vera's painting. And I'm thinking, if Vera can make a silk painting out of one of my designs, so can I. And the blue touch paper had been lit. Starting at the beginning. First, the paints are liquid, water-based, acrylic, and these have a handy dropper that comes with the bottle. And here is a piece of silk material. This quality is called Habitat 8. Now, when you paint on fabric, of course, the liquid goes straight through to the other side. So you have to raise it off the deck. And you can do this with a simple wooden frame. And I shall stick some masking tape across to support the silk. Along each side. And then turn the frame over and stick the silk onto the masking tape. And turn it back again. So I've got 3 colours, red, blue and green. And I start with a few drops of red. And immediately the paint begins to spread through the silk due to capillarity until it reaches a steady state, and then it begins to dry. And we'll put some blue in between the red. But already we can see that it would be better to restrict the flow of paint with some outlining or blocking medium. And this is called gutta. So the gutta comes in small tubes with a nozzle, which gives a good line, and we can trail a pattern across our silk. But you can see, can't you, that it is not easy. You need a steady hand and a steady trickle of gutta from the tube. But this is a way of creating a pattern on our silk. And ideally we should run a border round the edge to stop the paint falling off the edge of the silk. And again, best to leave that to dry. So now we can get an interesting pattern, and I'm using a paintbrush, and I've mixed the paint with a drop or two of water so that it moves quite quickly. And again, the paint spreads, but hopefully it stops at the gutta outline. So we'll put some blue in between. And get a moderately interesting pattern. And again, we need to let that dry. But trying to draw with gutta is not so easy. I wanted to depict some of my favourite subjects, flowers, accurately and in detail. I found that you could buy ready printed outlines from a company called Artis, but I wanted to use my own designs. I heard that their production was based on screen printing, so I gradually worked up the method for creating screens from my own line drawings and then printing from them using gutta as the printing medium. I start with a fresh specimen of my chosen subject, and this is River Lily, and I've got a photograph as well, and I make sketches on tracing paper until I'm satisfied with my design, and then I retrace it using a black opaque pen onto more tracing paper, and from that I can generate a screen, as in silk screen printing, and from my screen I can print a gutta outline using the gutta as the printing medium. And we're ready to start painting. And so painting into our gutta outline becomes pure delight. The silk does the painting. And as I've said many times before, even grown-ups can do it. And you can dilute the colours. I've diluted the red slightly with water. You can blend colours by painting one next to another. You can add a drop of water to a patch of damp paint to produce a highlight. See if we can do that with our petals. But remember that once the paint is dry, it can't be modified. So we might get a little highlight in each of our petals there. And I've divided the background into 5 areas, and I shall paint them alternately in the green and the blue. And we'll start with the blue here. And look, you don't even need a steady hand, which I've also said a number of times before. And we'll put a little bit more of a highlight in there, see what happens. So I've added a second colour into some of the background, and now we'll leave that to dry, see what happens. And here is my painting of River Lily, now that it's dry. But my silk painting story doesn't stop there. The next stage is the production of a grid for making patterns based on 1/2 centimetre squares, the same size as your standard squared paper, and patterns similar to those from cross-stitch and weaving, and I've called it Pixel Silk. My largest grid measured 16 by 20 inches, quite challenging for printing, but you can see that I made great use of it to create pictures and patterns. And I had in mind that my designs would be reproduced for soft furnishings, curtain material, even gift wrapping paper. And this is one of my recent floral pictures, A4 size and one of a set of 12. But today I've gone back to a smaller size, 4 inches square, from which I can create these tiles with a myriad of colour combinations and patterns. And I shall describe the method in some detail. So I put together some more wooden frame pieces, and I'm going to stretch a piece of mesh across the frame. And first I'll mark the position of the frame with a pen, leaving nothing to chance. And I'm going to use a staple gun. And first I'll start in the top right-hand corner, and I'll put a couple of staples in there. And then I'll put some tension on the mesh down the side there and fix that side in place. And we repeat that for each side. And there's our screen fully stretched. So next we're going to apply a layer of light sensitive emulsion to our screen. And I'll take about a level tablespoon and drizzle it down the side and hope that that's about the right amount. And with a squeegee, I spread it across my screen. Perhaps a little bit too much, no problem. And turn it over and spread it on the other side. And then in the other direction until we have a smooth, even coating. we put that in a dark cupboard to dry. Yes, the airing cupboard. So in the meantime, I need to draw my grid onto clear acetate using my opaque pen and tracing from a piece of squared paper. Why not? And I shall draw the lines in one direction first, and then turn it round and draw the lines in the other direction. So there are my lines in one direction, and I shall turn my work round and draw the lines in the other direction. And here is my finished grid, and you'll see that I've increased the thickness of the line to mark the boundary of my grid, and I've added another line to help with printing, you'll see. Plus I've marked the centre of the grid with a small dot. So our screen is dry and ready to expose. So I place the acetate, which I've mounted on a piece of glass, onto my screen and leave it in a good light for 20 minutes. Hopefully, where the emulsion is exposed to light, it hardens to the point that it cannot be removed. But where the emulsion is not exposed to light, that is to say under all those lines, we should be able to wash it away. So we leave that for 20 minutes. So fast forward 20 minutes, let's see what has happened. So we remove the glass and acetate and plunge the screen into water. And keep our fingers crossed. And yes, I can already see a trace of my grid. And after some encouragement, so we shall take that up to the bathroom and pour water from a height onto the screen, and slowly, slowly, the emulsion that has not been exposed to light will wash away. So our screen has been power washed under the shower and allowed to dry, and is now ready for the next stage. So now to print from my screen using gutta as the printing medium, not from a small tube this time, but from a bottle. And I shall apply it on a sponge roller, getting a uniform supply on the roller. But there are other ways of doing it. I've prepared a piece of silk, even wetted and ironed it to be sure it's fair and square. And I can position my screen using that outer border of my stencil. And this is what I do. One way, and then another, and another, and another. and a final swipe to be sure. And let's see what we've done. And there is a small piece of pixel silk, and we'll leave that to dry. And finally comes the fun of painting a pattern into the grid. I've got a fresh palette of colours. This is very dark blue, and I shall start at one corner making a pattern based on 7 squares, and I shall repeat that pattern across my grid, bearing in mind that there are 21 squares in each direction. And this part of the process can become seriously but harmlessly addictive. You can see that, can't you? The silk does the painting. So I've completed my pattern with the dark blue, and I shall fill in all the remaining squares with that lovely bright yellow. So when the paint is completely dry, the silk needs to be ironed, and for my purposes, ironed onto medium weight Vilene, and then mounted, glued onto a piece of MDF or plywood, and finally varnished, and you have a tile in pixel silk. I can't complete this story without mentioning my good friend Alison Beck, who runs silkcraft.co.uk and has kept me supplied with materials throughout. She's also included a number of my designs in her catalogue, so thank you, Alison. Well, I hope you've enjoyed sharing my saga of silk painting, from trying to draw with gutta from a tube, then developing this elaborate process for printing gutta outlines using the screen printing method, and generating pixel silk, and finally painting for pleasure. I would like to thank my friend Julie and son Andrew for technical support throughout, and hope to see you again soon.